DeFi is where you should be. There's AOL, and then there was the open internet. And Ledger represents, security and self-custody in the open internet.
And for us, it's really the same thing, right? Like if you're going to move assets across chain, you need to have a way that you as the user are the only one who can control that. And that can't be through a centralized intermediary, like definitionally, right? It's the exact same point.
And definitionally is the right way to say it. I think where we really share values between us is the only actual security is security by design.
Right. We're thinking about it very similarly on our side. Like we don't actually usually lead by thinking about it this way, but at its core, like Zen BTC is a self-custody product. Instead of it being self-custodied on a physical device, it's self-custodied by guarantees of the protocol. That's all decentralized. So we believe that you're gonna have to move assets all around. And it's kind of the same thing. It's like, if you're gonna have effectively your private key sit somewhere, which it needs to sit in a secure device.
What you guys did is incredible. For those who don't know, we launched a Solana Edition Ledger Flex device this year. It comes with a soulbound token. And then you guys were the first people to do an airdrop, and you basically offset the cost of the device for those people by more than 50% in one day. You're just like, oh, I just got a 50% discount I didn't ask for. Thank you. So that was really cool as hell and killer. Thank you, guys.
Ian, welcome to zrTalks episD 7. Really excited to have you here.
Lucky 7.
Lucky number 7. Just want to preface really quickly, 50T is an investor in Ledger. That's the fund that incubated Zenrock. Both Jack and I sit on the investment team here as well. We're the co-founders of Zenrock. So nothing that we say here is financial advice, but let's get to it. Ian, you've had arguably one of the most successful careers spanning multiple different industries.
Which is interesting since I never intended to have a career. But like whenever someone says that, I'm like, I did? Oh, wow. That was an accident.
Well, your career spans music, luxury, fashion, and now crypto. And maybe for some of our listeners that don't know you, it would be helpful just to give some background and we could fly through this.
Sure, yeah. I mean, because there's a bunch of places you can hear me tell my story out there now, and
exactly.
I feel like I always think I'm kind of like a stand-up comedian. You know what I mean? Like you're out there, you've got a lot of material that's like tried and true, and then you try out some new material too. So my background, I grew up in Indiana. I was a skateboarder, but I started programming computers when I was 8 years old, and to be honest, in high school, I kind of drifted away from it. I was a teenager. I was skateboarding. I was doing other stuff. But when I got to college, I really rediscovered it. I didn't start with computer science. I actually started studying education, and then I ended up with a Bachelor of Arts in computer science, which was kind of like at the time, it was a black mark in a way. Like it wasn't a black mark, I would say, but I remember my guidance counselor telling me, like, don't worry, I think it'll be okay. No one will notice, sort of thing. Like, you didn't get the BS, but it's all right, But I think throughout my career, it's actually turned out to be an advantage. And if you think about like what Dr. Dre and Jimmy Iovine did with the Iovine Young School at USC, they were really all about making people who had this balance of creative experience. I've never really been the creative director. I've more been the executive producer than the kind of creative guy, but always worked around creative people and creative arts, and have a lot of respect for creativity and creative people. At the same time, having the skills, to help my daughter with her computer science homework, as I did last night. And so I studied computer science, graduated in '94. Also, timing matters a lot, as you know, from investing. And so to graduate with a computer science degree in 1994, I actually started the grad program at Indiana University as well, but I could only stick around a year. It was just, I remember at the time, everybody was getting plucked out. I saw when I looked around, kind of all of the most talented students that I had started, that I'd studied computer science with as an undergrad, and then had gone on to grad school with, they were leaving because there were just opportunities, in the marketplace at that time. It was very difficult to stay in school because people wanted to hire, computer science kids. So, but for me, I knew I wanted to leave, but I didn't have like a big offer from Silicon Valley or anything. What I had was an offer from the Beastie Boys to come to Los Angeles and work for their record label. exactly how that happened, if you read the Beastie Boys book, it's in there. But that's what I ended up doing. I moved to Los Angeles because of the Beastie Boys, and then just did digital music for 20 years.
Right.
So I had started this work with streaming music at the Indiana University Music Library. And suffice to say, we sort of did different versions of that. Winamp in the late 90s,
Right.
Yahoo Music in the early 2000s, Topspin, and then Beats Music. I was the CEO of Beats Music. And then we sold to Apple, and I was the general manager of music and built Apple Music alongside Zane Lowe and Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre and the amazing Apple team, 2014, 2015. But then the personal part of that was 20 years of kind of Groundhog Day. How do we get music to be, instead of, something that you went to Best Buy and paid $17 for, something that, you first paid 99 cents for a song for, and then ultimately was $9.99 a month for all you can eat music. Well, we did that. In 2005, we launched the first $5 a month all-you-can-eat music subscription at Yahoo,
Right.
Yahoo Music Unlimited. And then by 2015, it was Apple Music going head-to-head with Spotify. And I would argue that was sort of like the starting line of digital music, just totally tipping over, not being something that was emerging any longer, but was something that really obviously anyone who cared about music was going to use. But it was also an oligopoly. You had Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Apple, and none of us were going to go start a digital music startup. The next SoundCloud wasn't
Right.
going to start in 2016. It was just clear it was a solved problem. We had gone from the internet being this incredibly difficult to use thing. I think people really take it for granted today, and this is relevant for a crypto audience because we talk about how difficult it is to use crypto, and can an average person use crypto? I really remember the internet was that. It was very difficult to use, and if your roommate picked up the phone, you lost your connection, and the connections were slow, and the services were poor, and it starts there. And
Yeah.
now, if you say hey Siri, play the Beatles starts playing on your phone. So we went from this thing where there was no digital music, the files were big, hard disks. We worked with IBM on a file system that was for streaming media because hard disks weren't even fast enough to stream audio. And now I can I can walk around New York City and listen to music, listen to books, listen to podcasts. I never even think think about it. And I have 2 SIMs in my phone. It's just the distance that we've come in 30 short years is actually just incredible. So that's, but my point of kind of saying that was that for me, I was at the finish line from a digital music perspective, but I didn't know what I would do next. And I got a call from LVMH, big luxury conglomerate based in Paris, that owns everything from Louis Vuitton to Hennessy to Celine to Sephora. And they were really looking to be modern when it comes to the internet. So spent 5 years there working on, my title was Chief Digital Officer, and the first thing I had to do was figure out what that means. But what it really came to mean to me, and I'm very proud of what we accomplished, was e-commerce, clienteling, meaning if you walk into a Dior store, what's the application in the hand of the sales associate? Tell them about you and about what you might want to buy and how they can serve you better, and data.
Yeah.
Really a data pillar there. There's another big pillar, which was HR. When I came in, IT was a function that reported to the CFO because it was something that was meant to be, it was a risk that was meant to be, or a cost maybe is a better way to put it, that was meant to be minimized in terms of risk and dollars, or euros in this case.
Right.
But it's not. I mean, for all businesses, technology is a strategic driver of business, and it needs to report to the CEO. So we went through that transformation and hiring a lot of great people, and the work carries on. But that was 10 years ago when I moved to Paris for LVMH, and I met Pascal Gauthier, who is today the CEO of Ledger, but at the time was the first seed investor in Ledger and a board member. And then I also met Tony Fadell, who is the inventor of the iPod, co-inventor of the iPhone, founder of Nest. We were, Pascal was at that point, very deeply invested in crypto. I wouldn't say very. He'd started one company and invested in another, but he'd actually been, orange pilled by Vensless, like many people in Silicon Valley. He was the COO of Criteo, the only French company to ring the bell on the NASDAQ in the last 25 years. And just an incredibly, I think really iconoclastic and brilliant, original individual. So he was quite deep into crypto. Tony and I were, I would say, very curious. Like we were curious enough that we bought crypto, but our lives weren't that. We're just sort of, I think that Tony and I are the kind of people who at the time thought, well, of course the internet will have its own money. Like we know the inefficiency of working with credit rails on the internet. Like we've done that firsthand and it doesn't work. Like it's a real pain in the ass. And kind of the way I always thought is something that just wasn't like internet grade in a way. I think what Stripe really brought to the internet was, taking a credit card payment, something that felt more like writing an app for the internet, right? Which it wasn't, and I started building apps that took credit cards in the 90s and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, what is this? I had never worked in, enterprise software. So I just didn't, I was like, what? Like these APIs don't make any sense. Like these flows don't make any sense. Who built these? This is garbage. And so for me, when I thought of crypto, I thought of it in that term. I thought of it as, this is sort of like the internet grade money.
Right.
And so for me, it just felt really obvious. But then it was 2020, kind of 5 years after I had started at LVMH. It was COVID, it was lockdown. Tony Fidel's family, my family were pod families. Tony and I are looking at what's going on in both technology and the world, and we said, this is it. Right. This is the moment. Which I think was around the same time for Dan and starting 10T, because there was that moment where we went, we've known about this. We've maybe even been invested in it for a long time, but it's really here. It's timing is everything.
Of course.
It was early before. Now it's not early anymore. We have both the technology and the need. So in other words, the technology had matured to a place where we weren't talking about smart contracts. We were programming smart contracts and doing something with them. And you had $2 trillion of stimulus in the US and $1 trillion of stimulus in Europe. And, I had even, Bernard Arnault's right hand and CFO telling me, yes, this is unprecedented and no one knows what happens next.
Right.
So I was, kind of all in and went to my friend Pascal, who had been trying to hire me at Ledger for a couple of years, and said, I'm in. What are we doing? Right. I believe in this. And the reason I believed in Ledger at the time, maybe just to put a cap on this, is to me, for me, my belief in Ledger came not in 2020, but in 2018. In 2018, I called Pascal and I said, I think your Ledger company is going to be huge. And he was like, okay, well, why do you finally get it? And I said, because it reminds me of Cisco in kind of the dot-com wars. In the late 90s, there was World War 3.0. There was a book by Ken Alawata called World War 3.0, and it was the early years of the internet through the eyes of Microsoft, AOL, and Netscape, right? And so you always had this, whether it was like, who's going to win, Excite, Lycos, or Yahoo? And is it going to be, Alta Vista or Google? And like, Microsoft wants to kill Netscape, AOL buys Netscape, and then Cisco's just kind of sitting on the side going, we're good. Like we have one basic question. Will there be more internet tomorrow or less internet tomorrow? We think more. So as long as we don't fuck this up, we're going to be okay. And so for me, during ICO madness, I was like, ooh, I believed in this Bitcoin thing, and I even believed in this Ethereum thing, but Kodak coin? Like, where are we? Like, what's going on? And I was also just like, A, I have no idea. B, I don't want to care. Like, I can't follow this.
Yeah.
I just, this is .com madness. And then when the dust settled, I went, oh, who didn't care? Ledger.
Right.
That was what I got. I was like, oh, Ledger has, just like Cisco had one question, more internet or less internet, Ledger has one question, more digital ownership or less digital ownership? Because if not self-custody, why crypto?
Right.
Yeah.
And if self-custody, then security. And I don't, if you have a $10 trillion industry, the number one security company in that industry is going to be very valuable.
Right.
We might not know today at all what that product is, actually, right? But if you have 10 trillion of digital asset value and none of it has any value without self-custody, right? I mean, the Bitcoin, you might be buying Bitcoin in an ETF, but your Bitcoin in your ETF does not have value, doesn't have the same value if it's not permissionless money.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, who's responsible for that security? I don't care if it's on the custodial side or the retail side, like whoever is the expert in the security of those assets is going to be just fine.
Yeah.
That was kind of my overall calculus.
Yeah.
Now the rest is execution. You know what I mean? John Chambers had to not screw it up. And I think we're in that same position. But yeah, that was the sort of the background up to today in some ways. Well, at least up to me joining Ledger.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'm sure it's been a hell of a 5-year run, coming up on 6 now.
No, coming up on 5.
Coming up on 5.
January 21 is when I started.
Got it. Yeah. And timing is everything. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. One of the most fascinating things to me about Ledger is really the brand that is associated with it. And you've spent a lot of your career like really developing huge brands between Apple Music, Beats before that, and then LVMH now. And I think Ledger has kind of become a verb in a sense, like, oh yeah, just put on your ledger it, right? And how do you see that really moving into this next stage of crypto, the more institutionalized version of crypto, where you're having a massive flow of traditional capital, traditional flows coming in, big money coming in? And how do you see Ledger's brand really making an impact on that flows?
Well, I think Ledger's brand needs to mean security and trust. I think it also needs to remain a premium brand. And I think that's important, because security and self-custody are premium. Like it is a premium offering in a way, right? Like anybody can download a software wallet, and it's actually it's not a secure product, right? I wouldn't say it's a bad product. A lot of software wallets are great and they work well and they have great UI and those sorts of things, but they are fundamentally insecure. So, security is a premium, especially when you're talking about value.
Right.
I think that you need to think about it because there's both an enterprise aspect to the brand as well as the retail side, and and the thing that really holds between the two needs to be security and self-custody. So we can never compromise on security and self-custody, and we also, in our drive is really to continue to improve the user experience without compromising on security and self-custody. So every cycle, as you know, you have people that are very willing to compromise on security and self-custody, and they give you very rational reasons why they need to. It usually involves the phrase onboarding the masses, and it always ends in disaster, right? And so we need to kind of hold that line, which means maybe we will grow more slowly, but that it's an ideal worth holding because security and self-custody do have real value. I think that on the retail side, let me speak specifically there. Like any big brand faces, as you grow, you have growing pains. But I think for us, really, we'd rather grow more slowly than lose trust. Even when I was at Apple, I remember Eddie Q saying to me that consumer trust is more valuable than consumer data. And he was speaking specifically about Apple Pay and why they do not want consumer data in the context of Apple Pay. They would much rather have consumer trust, because it's a longer term proposition. And to your question about traditional finance, because I think it is very relevant for this cycle, back in 2021, it was very much a self-custody cycle, right? It was we were talking about DeFi, we were talking about NFTs. Those are primarily self-custody things. And what do you have in this cycle? You have this intersection of TradFi and crypto. And I think if you look at it, like there's something happening right in plain sight right now that I don't feel like very many people are seeing. The same way that Amazon is the everything store, and we went from Jeff Bezos saying like I sell books to I sell everything, right? Brian Armstrong is saying every day we are the everything exchange.
Yeah.
And now look what Robinhood has done. They've kind of said, we're right behind you.
Right.
they've actually said, we were over here with these kind of this banking crowd, you know what I mean, during the Biden administration. But now that there's this regulatory tailwind, forget about that pack. We want to be over here in the same lane as Coinbase. I think that's fantastic. I think it's going to be very fun to watch that race in the coming years, and I can't wait for Kraken to be added to that mix as a public company. And you have a real strong pack of people who are building great financial services for retail. And for Ledger, if you are serious about wealth and digital value, you need a ledger. Period. If you're not serious, by the way, that's fine. You stay with Robinhood and Coinbase, right? When you're serious, you will come to Ledger, because DeFi is where you should be. You know, it's like, there's AOL, and then there was the open internet, right? Being inside of a walled garden, custodial exchange is AOL. And being in the world of decentralized finance is the open internet. And Ledger represents, security and self-custody in the open internet. So also in that way, for us, the work that we need to do is to continue to add to the services that we offer. So we have a great set of services today. If you look at the business in 2021, 0% of our revenue was from services. And today, 50% of our revenue is from services: buy, swap, stake, credit card, Ledger Recover, et cetera. And really, we need to offer everything that our users want to do from secure self-custody. And so, really, security and self-custody should be an assumption with Ledger, and then you're coming because you can get better yield, you can get better liquidity, better order flow. Your paycheck can go into your ledger. You can spend with your Ledger credit card. You've got peer-to-peer payments, scan to pay, et cetera. That's the the future on the retail side. And then on the enterprise side, we need to cover that full spectrum of enterprise, from small enterprise to large. We've really only covered large enterprise up to this point, and then we need to do the same for them. Everything that they want to do with their assets, they need to be able to do from enterprise-grade self-custody. There is no such thing as enterprise-grade self-custody today, except for Ledger. If you are a government in America self-custodying Bitcoin, well, there's only one way to do it. In fact, if you are choosing if you're choosing a custody service, you are not self-custodying Bitcoin. Right. And so, that's an important product offering. But, we need to cover the full spectrum and everything that people want to do with those assets as well. So, really being that, and I think, we have this partnership with the San Antonio Spurs now. Yeah. And, that first part that I said, I think is what, as we build awareness, what we'd like people to understand. If you're serious about wealth, you need Ledger. Right. There'll be many people that are in software only, and that's not serious. Yeah. If you're in software only, you're simply not serious.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like, a lot of the points that you make, we're trying to do the exact same thing at Zenrock, right? We have gone to large lengths to build the entire chain completely decentralized and permissionless, and to actually put in place a lot of these security things. There are tons of people out there in similar positions, maybe doing kind of different businesses, but directionally similar, who would be like, let's just launch it and kind of just we'll custody the tokens and just kind of hold it on behalf of the user, and we'll figure out how the chain works. We'll figure out how the infrastructure works after. And that's why we've seen so many hacks and money lost and trust completely.
Yeah, those are short-term strategies.
They're short-term strategies, and
they work at a certain part of the cycle.
They do. But I think that a lot of what you're saying, I mean, we really try to embody as well, in the same way of being like super long-term, and that's why you've been able to make it through all these cycles. But I wanted to touch a little bit more like on some of the stuff that you were saying around like the way people use their ledgers, because I think there was a time, maybe 3 years ago, whenever it was, where like the average ledger user would just put some Bitcoin on it, some ETH, and then put it in a safe. Exactly. We're never touching it, not connecting it to anything. There's a time in this industry where so many sites were trying to hurt you. It was very, very difficult to know what you could trust. And now we've matured. We're still not like where we're gonna be, but we're a lot better place. And as you're mentioning, like a lot of people are using their ledger to swap, to do all sorts of things in DeFi. So I guess like kind of how has that evolution been from your perspective, and also like where do you think it's going?
Well, I think it's definitely been a challenge because, as you said, like when people think of ledger, they think of that first use case that you mentioned often, which is, oh, for a ledger, that's where I buy and hold. Right?
Yeah.
And we started really adding services. They had some buy services before I joined, so 2020 is when that began, and then we've just been accelerating ever since. And now we're at a point where and also the other one of the other great value propositions that Ledger has always had is being multi-chain.
Right.
So we were actually going into this kind of service mindset with a multi-chain approach. And I think one of the things that has actually proven genuinely difficult is to do clear signing.
Yeah.
Across all of these use cases, multi-chain, and that sort of, I think it sort of snuck up on the industry, to be honest, and I think it's still out there because if you look at a lot of the hacks that are happening, they would be prevented by clear signing. I mean, we had an incident last week, all of us on the internet, the NPM hack.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the attacker did a poor job, but if you use it as a kind of a wake up call, if the attacker had done a good job, the entire internet could have been affected with a very detrimental bug or attack, and the only defense was clear sign on a secure screen, right?
Yeah.
Which means ledger, right? So in other words, like there was a moment last week when we weren't sure the impact of this particular attack, and it could have been much worse, right? Like just structurally could have been much worse, and for a period of time, your only move was only ClearSign or a ledger, or do not make any on-chain transactions. Period.
Which a lot of people took that route too.
Yeah, which by the way, if you can wait, right?
Yeah.
But like that's really crazy. That's sort of how how fragile we are. So I would say there's multiple levels to this. Is kind of my point in that what we want to do is to enable people to do whatever it is they would like to do with their crypto.
Right.
On some level, though, there's a bit of like, protect me as well, right? So please keep me safe, but that means clear signing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't have all this security and then the last step of this is like, YOLO, I looked good, probably okay.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make sense for making big transactions on an immutable blockchain in a world with more than 4 trillion in value, where we know it's going to 10 trillion, right?
Yeah.
Like in the not too distant future. So, so for us, there's kind of a big, it's really a big mountain to climb because, we have, we're constantly, one of the things that we do is blockchain integration, I think it's kind of a well-kept secret of Ledger at this point, but if you're paying attention, you would notice that we've been integrating more blockchains and more services faster than ever in the history of our company, while some other pieces of hardware are actually removing support for things, right? But we've found a scalable way to do it. We work very closely with the foundations, with the chains to do it. But there's a lot there. There's send and receive, there's buy, there's swap. Swap is actually pretty hard because now you're like in the device interaction to do a swap, and you're working with swap partners, and you got to make sure that if a user's sending one token out and they're getting another token back, that there's no potential for failure in that. People swap very large amounts on Ledger. We have the AOV on Ledger is unlike any software wallet.
Mm-hmm.
We have kind of the 5 million people who hold 20% of the value, right? So the AOV for us is extremely high. So the stakes are high. And then there's staking. We're always working with partners, with foundations. We're looking at delegations. There's these sorts of things. Then there's also all of the dApps and supporting the dApps with clear signing. There's supporting third-party wallets. And then there's also supporting enterprise. And then all of those applications on enterprise. So to pull that all the way through and do clear signing is super difficult. It really requires kind of community effort, support from the foundations and the chains themselves. But that's what we're always always trying to do. And some of it is about, a lot of it is about business, of course. We want more people to use Ledger for more, no question. At the same time, it's about keeping those communities safe. When FTX went down, the Solana Foundation was so thankful for Ledger, especially users that were staking using Ledger, because they had a lot to worry about at that moment, and those were users they didn't need to worry about. They were locked up for 30 days in secure self-custody. Like every single one of those people is like, one person I don't have to worry about right now, right? That is super good for communities to have that. So my point is that I think there's, for me, the thing I love about my job is that and also to your point about brand, we're not better because we have a nice brand and nice design or even nice industrial design. It's fundamentally different. Our architecture is different. If your bar for security is a private key that is generated by and stored in a secure element, cryptographic computations done in a secure element and not a general purpose MCU like is in your toaster or your remote control, and clear signing on a secure screen, there is not another choice. Not another way to do it. Not an exchange, not another hardware wallet, certainly not any wallet on your phone. There's just not a way to do it. And so, but the challenge is allowing people to do that for everything they want to do.
Right.
There are many things that if I wanted to do them today, I would still need the blind sign.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, so I think we have, I feel like I'm only kind of answering your question, because the question is like, going from, kind of the cold storage, which is kind of a non-moniker, I think, at this point.
Yeah.
All the way to like security at the point of transaction, right? You know what I mean? Security, I would argue security at rest is fairly simple, right? Lots of ways to do security at rest. Security during transaction is something that, not very many people have. Your bank doesn't even have it, right? The reason that your banking app is such a nightmare to use is because they can't be sure you are who you say you are. So then, to answer your question on where it's going, I think it goes there, because it goes much far beyond like, I want to send some Bitcoin. It ultimately goes to, I use my ledger as my passkey, right?
Yeah.
So when I log into Google or an exchange or X, my passkey is my ledger, my login.gov account, which I love. Even recently, I was using one of the I can't remember what it was for, but I signed up for something and I had to do one of the like human checks.
Yeah.
It asked me if I wanted to store it for later using passkeys. I stored it on my ledger. So now I can, using a non-crypto third-party service, prove humanity using my ledger.
Yeah.
Which I think
that's fascinating.
That's the future. I'm using it for passkeys. I'm using it for proof of humanity.
Right.
And ultimately I'm using it for, how can I prove that I'm over the age of 18 or over the age of 21 without giving up any personally identifiable information?
Yeah.
ZK. There's, you know what I mean? Like
totally.
Identity,
privacy.
Yes, exactly. Also, I think in a world, in an agentic AI future.
Yeah.
Did you see Google launched yesterday this what's called
Age-
AP2?
Yeah.
Super fascinating.
Incredible.
It feels like, I hope people are paying attention to this news. But how is that going to work? Am I going to give the agent my Delta login and my credit card information? Like that is a honeypot I don't want. By the way, if you haven't already opened ChatGPT and looked through your memories, please do it now. I showed it to to one of my daughters last night, and she was like, her first words were, "Ooh, creepy." And
it's like your own personal diary now.
Where do you want that to live? We developed the Ledger Keyring protocol. I super encourage everyone to go watch our CTO Charles Guillemet's talk from Consensus. No, not Consensus. I'm sorry. It was the Blockworks conference in Utah. Permissionless. Thank you. Last year, and Ledger Keyring protocol is all about storing preferences without a login. So if you're using Ledger Live on your phone or your desktop, and you'd like to also use it on your phone or your desktop, vice versa, you can store all your preferences. Ledger Sync, it's called. There's no login. There's nothing stored unencrypted in a cloud. We encrypt your preferences and store them who cares where, because they're encrypted. And then you use your ledger to sign and load all of your accounts into the other device. The reality is that no one needs to have your preferences except you.
Right.
Technically, We already live in that world. We live in a world where every website has our preferences, and it's a honeypot that can be stolen. And there should be a future where the only person who has your preferences is you, and they are encrypted, and only you have the key to unencrypt them.
Right.
I mean, I would feel much better if all of those memories were encrypted, living locally with me, running locally with me. That would be, I think, a much better future to live in. I don't think we're even close to the place where they're doing Cambridge Analytica like shit with our memories, but it's coming.
Yeah, I mean you touched on many interesting points there, and I think one of the most interesting that I came to is that we're constantly battling in crypto today between like closed systems and open systems, and how much do you really want to sacrifice your self-sovereignty and your data and your privacy for closed systems that may use a more optimized UX and it's just easier to use versus a more open system that may be a little harder to use and may take some more time to get educated to use it, but you're not sacrificing your personal self-sovereignty and your data, right? So curious how you thought when, over the past 4 years at Ledger between battling closed systems that historically have better UXs and are easier to onboard people versus an open, permissionless, decentralized system, which Ledger is essentially today, right? The epitome of today, being open, decentralized, and permissionless.
So I think some of it is practical and some of it is idealistic, right? I mean, so first of all, for me personally, back in 2001, when I opened a LinkedIn account, I'm guessing the year, but somewhere in that era, and I had to write a bio. I just wrote the first thing that came to mind, which was decentralizing that which was previously top down. And my LinkedIn page still says that. It said that
That's
for
awesome.
nearly 25 years. So, and if I speak for Charles Guillemet, our CTO, he comes from a very similar place. Like what drew us to this originally was the notion of permissionless money and the freedom that can give individuals. At the same time, when you're running a business, your duty is to your shareholders, right? And so how do you generate shareholder value? So I think for us at Ledger, it's actually quite practical. We have, we've set this bar to say that we are focused. We will never compromise on security or self-custody, yet we have to drive to better user experience. And we think that that's differentiating. We'll leave the compromise to other people. And there will be times when they'll pull ahead of us, certainly in terms of users, because they've made that choice. Also, that allows us to not be a regulated custodian and have a global business. We ship Ledger in 200 countries every single month. Whereas, if you're a regulated custodian, you're geographically much more limited and constricted. So we really do kind of believe in, the future networked world.
Yeah.
And we're very happy to take the people from all over the globe who are serious about their wealth, who are serious about digital assets, who value security and self-custody. But it's our job to really they won't use us if they can't do what they want to do with us. I think there are many people where if you simply had the offerings of Coinbase, Robinhood, Ledger, and they're all equal, but this one is secure and self-custody, there are many, many, many people who will choose Ledger, either because it's the only choice. These other regulated custodians are not available in their jurisdiction, or it's better ideologically. You have to be better from an actual service offering perspective, though. And I believe that decentralized will be, just like that analogy of AOL versus the open internet. I think when we have Hyperliquid is a great example of something that really can only exist in an open, decentralized world, and it really offers a lot to the retail customer, right? And I think that we're only seeing the tip of that iceberg. Yeah. And if you look at A16Z's mid-year report on the state of crypto, you've got DeFi versus centralized transactions. Up more than 50% year on year.
Yeah.
So even though the centralized offerings are doing incredibly well, decentralized offerings are growing even more.
Yeah.
So that I think is a bet you can take both as a business and as something that we believe deeply in. So I think that really again, if not self-custody, why crypto?
Yeah.
And I also think that as the security company in the space, that's important. Over the long term, I mean, if you look at a 20-year time horizon, Ledger's been around 11 years, we'll be around 11 more plus. Who knows what our product offering looks like? I mean, Intel started out as a memory company, right? What I think will be the same is we'll have a world of digital assets. At the heart of those assets will be self-custody. And if at the heart of those assets is self-custody, then security is not a nice to have, right? It is an absolute must. And then we need to continue to be the leaders in that space, and we can never compromise on that security and self-custody. And we just have to make it, give people all the services that they want to use on top of it as well. So we're always just prioritizing, those things. I think one other way to look at it as a consumer is, if you're making a decision on what to choose, I think, first of all, I just think it's astounding that, again, we're over 4 trillion in assets, and we probably couldn't come up with 5 places that we would recommend a friend to hold their digital assets.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy,
yeah.
Right? And Ledger sits at the top of that list.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing, but a little scary, right? So if you are a consumer and you're thinking, well, where should I hold my assets? You should start first with security. It's important. And you go second with ease of use, and inside of ease of use, I'd say service offering, right? Do you have all of the coins I want? Do you have all the services I want? Can I do all of the things that I want to do in a permissionless way?
Right.
With that. And then the third thing is recoverability. We haven't touched on that yet, but I think it is a very important one, which is, I have a friend who lost his house in the Pacific Palisades fire. He also lost his Nano and his recovery sheet. We need to do better than that. That's why we have Ledger Recover, so you can back up and restore your seed phrase using your identification if you opt into it. And we've also just launched Ledger Recovery Key, which is an electronic, pin-protected, NFC-based backup, so you can tap it on the back of your device. We have NFC in the device, and then you can tap the card on the back of the device, and it backs up. If you lose, put it somewhere safe, you lose your device, get a new one. Put it on the back, boom, you reload it. You've got all your accounts back. You have 3 Ledger Recovery Keys. They're pin protected. You put them in 3 different physical locations. You've got, you've got a good start on some good recoverability. So I think those are that's the other way we look at it: security, ease of use, recoverability.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because and this is something that I've spoken about, especially with, friends who are outside of the industry, right? They're like, some people get scared of self-custody. And I think that there is a valid point of being like, okay, especially for someone who doesn't, understand crypto at all, or is okay, I want to own Bitcoin, but I don't want to be responsible for all this. But I think to your point, you can't really, there's no half self-custody, right? You either have control or you don't. Yeah. And the second that you don't, then you don't. And maybe for some use cases, as you mentioned, that's okay. And for some users who are kind of just dipping their toe into it, maybe that's okay to just start off, just put some money into Coinbase, own Bitcoin, own ETH, own Sol,
buy the ETF and have it sitting next to your Tesla stock in your portfolio. I agree. I think the future is heterogeneous.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's why I say for Ledger is for people who are serious about wealth and serious about digital assets, Ledger's not optional. But that won't be everybody.
Yeah.
I think there's 7 billion people on the planet with a password problem. How many of them have good password hygiene?
Zero. Precisely zero.
I mean, but I think there is an analogy there, and then also the question is good password hygiene becoming more or less important in the lives of humans, right? And the answer is certainly more, because it's a different context, but nothing stops this train, right? And that train includes inflation, as Lynn Alden would say, but it also includes cybercrime. Yeah. It includes the digitization of all information, which has already happened, the digitization of all value, which is underway, of movement toward AGI, which is underway, a movement toward quantum computing, which is underway, a movement toward robotics, underway. Nothing's going to stop these things. So what we need to do is we need to build better technology to give humans more control.
Right. Yeah, I think it's the same kind of thing. People don't have good password hygiene because it doesn't really matter. You know, most people are used to be like, oh yeah, I'll just like I don't even remember my password, but I'll try like 5 that I usually use, and if it doesn't work, I'll just have them send me a new one. But like your house keys, you wouldn't feel that way, right? You're gonna be super secure, and maybe passwords just need to become something that the mindset changes for your key devices that tap you into the entire internet.
Look, I think we're actually already kind of moving past that. It does intersect with Ledger and with crypto. The last time I logged in to Amazon, it asked me if I would like to kind of, it sort of gave me a choice. It was like, do you really want to keep going with passwords, or do you want to switch to passkeys? Right. And so you've got Google, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, everybody moving toward a passwordless future.
Yeah.
Well, we have a choice also as humans. Like, you could store that passkey in your iCloud account, or you could store it on your Ledger. Right. I mean, every one of your listeners has that choice today. And it's obvious which of those choices is preferable if you think about it for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, will everybody do it? Of course not. But the people listening to this podcast are the kind of people who will.
Yeah.
And they should, because it means, putting more of the control in their hands. And I mean, the Wall Street Journal did some great reporting a couple of years ago about people getting their iCloud account stolen and then losing their iCloud account, including their photos, and never getting it back.
Yeah.
Well, what happens when that includes your passkeys, right? And so, I mean, this stuff is important. And to your point, you said with the passwords it doesn't matter. That's true if your passwords don't protect any digital value. Right. So I was sitting next to actually a gallerist one night at dinner. This is in the last cycle, so you'll be able to tell from the story that it was in the last cycle. And he said, "Oh, I've got a couple of CryptoPunks." And I said, "Oh, really? Where are they?" He was like, "They're in my MetaMask." He didn't know what Ledger was, right? And I was like, "Okay, well, I'll explain what Ledger does." I was like, "If they were on your Ledger, I couldn't steal them from you, but where they are, I can steal them from you." And he was like, "You can?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I don't know, but I'm guessing that you use the same password on most of your accounts. And you probably don't have like second factor authentication on your iCloud. And probably when you set up that MetaMask, you took a screenshot of the recovery phrase.
Yeah.
So I can just, look in the dark web, find your password from some data leak or some, hack from a while ago. And if you want, go to haveibeenpwned.com and see. And then, I'll get into your iCloud account, and thankfully, like, you've already like made it easy for me. I go into photos, and then I go screenshots, and then I look for the 12 words, and then I get the CryptoPunks. And he looked at me and he goes, "Please don't." And I was like, "I won't. Please get a Ledger."
Yeah.
And he was like, "Okay." But so my point is that the passwords don't matter until you have digital value.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. If the blast radius is like, "Oh my God, somebody's got my text messages from my girlfriend," all right. But if the blast, well, by the way, for some people that can be a pretty big blast radius. Ask Jeff Bezos. But for as soon as you have digital value, which everyone will, I think that's the other thing that, especially after FTX in America, many people didn't appreciate. I met many people in 2002 after the .com bubble who said, this internet thing, I'll never use it. I'll never have an email address. Okay, no one says that anymore, right? And when people say to me like, "Yeah, I don't do the crypto thing," I'm like, "All right, well, just call me in 10 years when your passport is digital." Like, I don't really want to argue with you about it, but like, this is inevitable. What is true though is that the crypto part of it will go away, right? Like, when you are using a lot of apps, whether it's PayPal or a peer-to-peer payments app, is it crypto underneath? But I don't know. It might be. I think what will happen is the systems will run on crypto, but is Satisfy a peer-to-peer app like is Spotify a peer-to-peer app like Napster was? Probably not, but we don't know. We don't care. It works.
Yeah.
It's the only thing we care about as consumers. We don't really care about the protocol underneath.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, crypto's always been really the back end, right? And applying like front ends that are easy and appealing from a UX perspective is definitely going to advance the industry. And you've seen that time and time again over the past two years. Look at Aave's front end, look at EtherFi's front end. They're all transforming into more fintech oriented applications where it's like save, spend, earn, right? Those are 3 big words. And borrow lend is actually providing the yield for deposits now. Instead, before then it was just this front end that was actually quite like, 2001 internet, like Curve Finance, right? For example, their front end is nothing compared to what we've accomplish now in terms of decentralized finance and borrow land.
That's right. And I think that's just a really normal part of the curve.
Right.
We experienced that at Ledger, right? I mean, who were the early Ledger users? They were very tech forward. They're early adopters. They didn't mind if the product needed them to help debugging it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's okay at the front end of a technology. I remember downloading Mozilla.tar.gz from Mark Andreessen servers. You know what I mean? Like that. We were those people in 1994 who were happy to do that. But today, you have a completely different set of expectations. So I think that curve is totally normal. And I really think that, we've reflected that in our product design, going from a USB shaped stick where you click OK with two thumbs to a secure touchscreen, designed by the same person who co-invented the iPhone and founded Nest. That's that same transition where you have to take the user-centric focus of a Tony Fadell and his, and the people that he's worked with for 20 plus years, and pair them with the uncompromising security-focused people of Ledger, and create this this new world so that we have secure self-custody, as an option for those of us who are serious about our wealth.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Again, going back to it, like we're thinking about it very similarly on our side. Like we don't actually usually lead by thinking about it this way, but at its core, like ZenBTC is a self-custody product, right? Instead of it being self-custodied on a physical device, it's self-custodied by guarantees of the protocol. That's all decentralized. So, we believe that you're going to have to move assets all around, and it's kind of the same thing. It's like, if you're going to have effectively your private key sit somewhere, which it needs to sit, it's like it needs to sit in a secure device that cannot just be easily connected to any internet thing at any time and be, have tons of fault points. And for us, it's really the same thing, right? Like if you're going to need to move assets across chain, you need to have a way that you as the user are the only one who can control that. And that can't be through a centralized intermediary, like definitionally, right? It's the exact same point.
And definitionally is the right way to say it. I think that what I was going to say before you said definitionally is where we really share values between us, is the only actual security is security by design.
Right.
Right. Everything else is security theater.
Yes.
Right. You can't just put a door in front of a door in front of a door in front of a door, and if you put enough doors, then it's secure. That's not security by design. Security by design, as you're saying, is actually designing the system so that if something is breached, that you minimize the blast radius. And again, I'm using sort of security industry way of looking at it. You'll never hear a credible security person say something is 100% secure. What you'll hear them say is the design is such that security has been maximized.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's also a way to look at it. I actually think it's an interesting point. It's like it's part of your design. To your point, you're always making these sort of judgment calls and trade-offs on what's the best way to do this, and similarly for us as we're designing things and offering features, whether it's we are 99+% open source, but we choose to use a secure element from a company that will not let us open source the code to the secure element, because the alternative would be to have a device that you can't feel comfortable forgetting in a cafe. And we choose security, right? We have designed to optimize for security. That is the number one piece. Or when you're building a product like Ledger Recover, which I encourage people to actually look at the white paper and kind of the blog post explaining how it works, because it's kind of us at our best in terms of design and designing something which, to your point from earlier, allows more people to come into self-custody, or your point about people being kind of scared of self-custody, allows more people to come in to feel secure with self-custody, because using my government issued ID, I can recover my accounts if I need to. So how do you design something like that meets our security bar? The only way is by design. It's not you can't be security theater, and
Yeah.
you cross your fingers. It has to be the thing where if there is an issue, that the blast radius is minimal. Like this is and it's security is a moving target. It's it's laughable that some people say that, oh well, you can't you can't be able to update firmware if you want to be secure. It's like it's simply not factual. Like something will change tomorrow, and you need to be able to to change with it. And so you have to design in such a way that you're minimizing risk, because eliminating risk is impossible.
Mm-hmm. It's frankly fascinating, and I think I want to touch on one point you made earlier on the agentic finance world. In a future where AI agents are paying AI agents on behalf of humans, where does Ledger's role fit in there? And one other point here is that a lot of this is driven by stablecoins, right? And I've heard you say that maybe stablecoins has become kind of the iPhone moment of crypto to a degree. But curious your thoughts on where Ledger's positioning really fits into this new agentic finance, which may take much longer than we're expecting, right? But will inevitably happen.
Yeah, I think we have a chance as as a species to have some control in this picture, right? So where would it be? It would be in rule setting, and in signing and approving, right? I mean, the way it should work is that not that I give the agent my credit card and my Delta login, like I was saying, et cetera. It should be that I can ask the agent to do something. The agent can ask me for what it needs, and I can federate my preferences to it to say, yes, you may have it, for this time period, for this usage, right? And then it presents an offer back to me. Would you like to buy this plane ticket? And I say, yes, I would, and I'll pay for it like this, and here's my approval on my secure screen. So, I would really like to live in a world where users own their preferences, and actually, turn the web inside out. Right now, we live in a world where our preferences are stored across thousands of websites. We use our username and login to access our preferences, which are actually owned by thousands of other people. Right. A much better world, which is completely doable, is one where I own my preferences wherever they live. Maybe they live on chain. Maybe they simply live in an AWS equivalent, but they're encrypted, and I hold the keys. Right. That's the key. Right. Is that I'm the one holding the keys to those encrypted assets. My preferences are an asset. And so that's where I think it lives. I also think that if you think about stable coins and spending, again, I think the world is heterogeneous. So let's like look at a topic like account abstraction. It might be the case that I have a couple $100 in a in a custodial wallet that gets topped up automatically from a non-custodial wallet. I use it for spending. I don't need a secure screen to spend out of that account. But whatever those rules are, because for some people that limit is going to be $20, and for some people it's going to be $20,000, right? Those rules should be set by a ledger. And what I mean by that is a secure screen. I mean, even if you have account abstraction, you're not going to be setting the rules for the AA wallet with a software wallet. Like, what's the point at that point? Right. You're in YOLO territory.
Yeah.
Anyway. So I think that there isn't a way, there is not a future where you can own digital value and not have a private key, which is protected by a secure element, and your approvals are asked for on a secure screen.
Right.
The future is impossible.
It almost sounds like, obviously I understand like all of these technological things that you're describing are based in cryptography. They're based in like ZK. They're based on all these new emerging technologies. But it almost sounds like the ledger of 10 years may not even be like a crypto company in the way that we think about a crypto company today, right? It's broader.
I think the really interesting thing, I like coming with you guys because we can talk about things that are slightly more technical. Like when I'm on a more mainstream show, I wouldn't go quite this far. But it's true that the innovation that the founders of Ledger did, what they really did, was they built the first open operating system and development environment on top of a secure element chip. Right? So what you have is the ability to create an arbitrary application on the same chip that's in your credit card. So everybody has the same chip that's in a ledger in their pocket. It's in their passport, it's in their credit card, and it is not over-the-air upgradable. You cannot load an arbitrary application on it. It's meant to protect the bank's secrets from you. That's what it was designed for. Fundamentally, a ledger was meant to protect your secrets from anyone else and to build an operating system and a development environment on top of that chip where you can run the application that you need to run. Now, because of Bitcoin originally, the first application for that is for sure digital assets. And it's a very powerful application. But as we have, again, just like the internet was this once in humanity digitization of all information, and now we're living through a once in humanity digitization of all value, now having, to your point, cryptography that protects secrets and allows you to securely sign, it gives you more power in this world of digital value. How much better would it be today if Coinbase and Robinhood had a feature that was settings, security, ledger? Like their app would be better and their users would be more secure, period. Right. Now, to be honest, they already have it. It's called passkeys, right? It's already like kind of baked into the two-factor. That's not a crypto application, but it works perfectly with Ledger. You could do a much deeper integration there. And actually the user experience would be better. When it comes to security, it's rare that you get security and user experience together. Usually it's the opposite. If you get more security, it's more of a nightmare. But really, if you think about it, like if I add a payee to my French, bank account, I've got to wait 48 hours to make a payment to that payee. Why? Because my bank can't be sure I'm me. They're so bad at their jobs that they can't be sure I'm me. Well, if they had a secured by Ledger feature, the user experience would get better. I could authenticate that transaction with a ledger, and I could do what I want to do. I could have higher limits. I would just have a better user experience and user interface. So I think it's, look, crypto is a killer app, period. I mean, the reality is because of crypto, I don't need a bank. Right? If 100%. I wanted to send you $20,000 right now, I would have a very hard time doing it. I probably wouldn't be able to do it from my bank without talking to a human being.
Right.
If I want to send you, $20,000 of Bitcoin, it's trivial because it is permissionless money.
Right.
It's gorgeous. So,
it's a beautiful thing.
Greatest invention of my lifetime, probably.
Absolutely. And it also goes to the point of it being the most reflexive asset probably in history. And you've dealt with a lot of like Veblen goods, like luxury goods, where as asset prices increase, demand increases as well. And we're seeing that happen now with Bitcoin as well, which is really interesting from more of a traditional lens. And I'm curious how you've thought about your time at LVMH broadly and applying that to Bitcoin now being this Veblen good, this highly reflexive asset where there's a lot of entropy via discussions, via movement, via value, et cetera. How did those two experiences really emerge? Like once you saw Bitcoin, were you like, holy shit, this is going to like go to $1 million and every person's going to own this? Or was it a bit more of a different spark?
For me with Bitcoin, it was a very long story because I first learned about Bitcoin in 2009 or 2010, I don't remember, from someone in my office. But for me, I thought, well, this won't work because it threatens state sovereignty. And I saw the way that you couldn't kill the Nutella or the BitTorrent network, but you could stop any company who touched it, right? And so that was I kind of dismissed it as that. I was like, well, that's a very cool invention, but the governments won't allow companies to run those. And we were, it's definitely been a struggle, no question, for a lot of that, for that reason. But for me, by kind of 2015, it had reached a critical mass point where the game theory was on, where if one country tried to shut it down, another would welcome it. So that was that was more of my story with Bitcoin. I think with Ledger, I definitely have a luxury framing for it.
Yeah.
Not necessarily luxury, but like I said, I think one of the great lessons from LVMH is that you can become the richest man in the world without selling to everyone. right? You can make great products for your audience and have an extraordinary business. Americans have a very hard time understanding luxury, like for that very reason. But also you have these businesses in luxury which have relatively few customers and sometimes extraordinarily large marketing budgets. But they do work because they aren't simply building product companies, they're building heritage brands, which means they're doing storytelling. So if you do, kind of the mixed media modeling on many luxury businesses, all of the storytelling they do is accretive. They tell the stories, it grows the brand, it grows the business. They tell the stories, it grows the brand, it grows the business. And that's sort of a machine that you just keep turning it and it keeps working. So I think that, storytelling plus time equals value. And that is, I think that is definitely true of both Bitcoin. I think that's true of Louis Vuitton, Bitcoin, and CryptoPunks.
Right.
Right. And Basquiat.
Right.
Right. In the case of Basquiat, every single year, more people know the story. There's no more supply. Number goes up. Right.
Exactly.
In the case of Bitcoin, every year, more people know the story. Supply is fixed. The number goes up.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the analogy would be in my view. I think that Bitcoin will turn out to have been the greatest brand of my lifetime. And it's an open source brand. Any of us could, put Bitcoin on a t-shirt. If you and I put Drake on a t-shirt, his manager's going to say, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Right.
You and I can put Bitcoin on a t-shirt, no problem.
Yeah.
I think it'll turn out, to be, and it's extraordinary because the asset is extraordinary. Story is extraordinary, everything about it. Not only that though, you always look back and it seems like it happened quickly, but it didn't. And it seems like it was sort of willed into being, but it wasn't. It is what it is because Bitcoin is what it is because many, many, many people have hated it, tried to break it, tried to hurt it, tried to kill it, but it's still here.
100%.
Right. So I think that it makes Bitcoin quite exceptional on a relative basis. Whereas if you think about luxury brands, they're built organically, brick by brick. They go through different phases, different storytelling, and they're not all equal. Like there are very few. You've got Louis Vuitton, Dior, Hermes, Chanel, and then everybody else. And so it's not like it's an infinite business. At the same time, like I always talk about, you have brands like Satisfy Running and Mischief, which are these new versions of these what I would say storytelling brands. I would say that more than luxury brands, which wouldn't be possible. They couldn't exist without the internet.
Right.
And then where that goes, I don't think we know yet. But there is a through line here somewhere, and I think that through line is simply storytelling. Last thing I'll say on this is I've loved personally Bitcoin and digital assets generally, NFTs and everything else, because it forces me to think deeply about what is value and how is value actually created. It's a shared story, right? No matter what fundamentals we can talk about, if we don't have a shared story, we don't have value.
Right.
And I love AI for the same reason, because now I'm thinking about what does it mean to be human?
Yeah.
Like really, what does it mean?
Yeah.
And wow, what have we created over the past really couple hundred years? Electricity is not that old.
Yeah.
Right. And where might this go? So I love these things because they just force us to confront, these things that we might not have thought that deeply about before. But, storytelling is in there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think we're up on time here, Ian. We could probably go another 24 hours here.
What you guys did is incredible. For those who don't know, we launched a Solana Edition Ledger Flex device this year. It comes with a Soulbound token. And then you guys were the first people to do an airdrop, and you basically offset the cost of the device for those people by more than 50% in one day. You're just like, oh, I just got a 50% discount I didn't ask for. Thank you. So that was really cool as hell and killer. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.